Hello, everybody. Hello, teens. We're here to bring you some reader's advisory about classic manga. We're thinking about manga from the 1980s and 90s. I just wanted to point out that a lot of these titles may not be available at the library because they're older, they're out of print, but you're probably reading the current works of these same artists and mangaka that are working on things. But a lot of the titles are available in our YA section and in our adult section. My name is Rebecca Oxley. I am the librarian 3 at Greenbelt. I have been reading manga for 25, 30 years. Back in the day, you couldn't just go to the bookstore and buy manga. They didn't even have a graphic novel section. So what I used to do was trade my anime VHS tapes. I don't know if you remember what those are, with people around the country that I would talk to on the internet. And that's how I got my hands on some manga. So, Maria, did you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, my name is Maria, and I'm a library associate at the New Carrollton Library. I've been reading manga for about 20 years as well. I was lucky enough that in elementary school, one of my classmates was from Japan, so she introduced me to it. So I was really excited, and I actually ended up borrowing a lot of her stuff because even though she, even though we didn't have English translations yet, she actually would help me read the Japanese version. So it was really cool. So that's how I was introduced to it. And then when they started showing up in the libraries, I immediately grabbed them.
Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm here from the Oxon Hill branch. I actually got into manga around middle school. I started watching Sailor Moon in the mornings, and then I wanted to know if there was anything that was book like that. And my mom took me to the now defunct Borders, and that is where I saw that there was so much. and I actually didn't end up purchasing Sailor Moon at that time. I purchased a book that I will talk about a little bit later.
Cool. And Amanda, say hi.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a librarian one at Akakik, and I probably first got into anime when I was in elementary school and things were being broadcast on TV, but I didn't really understand how different it was from American cartoons until I got into middle school. When they started showing things like Yu Hakusho and Rurouni Kenshin on Toonami. Um, I got into manga uh, during the early 2000s when it was just becoming popular to actually publish the written works as well as have the animated versions airing on TV.
Cool. Well, I think we should start off just by recommending one of our personal favorites. The one that I'm going to recommend is Blackjack by Osamu Tezuka, who is the granddaddy of manga. Um, Blackjack is a serial, so it's like it has a set bunch of characters and everything, and then every single volume is just a bunch of vignettes of different adventures that they go on. But Blackjack is the world's most mysterious and greatest surgeon. And he has like a big scar where like he has half of a different racial face. He like had an accident when he was younger, and somebody like donated a face to him. And he has a robot assistant, and he's sort of like House, like he's very curmudgeonly and tends to like slough off the status quo, but can perform these like wondrous surgeries. And I have to say, I just can't get enough of them. There are probably, I know we do have that in our adult section. There's probably like 11 volumes, and it's all good stuff. So, Maria, what would you like to recommend?
I would love to recommend Digimon Digital Monsters. There's always been this huge controversial debate between Pokemon and Digimon. But what made Digimon awesome was the fact that virtual pets actually allowed it for the popularity to grow. for the manga and the anime series, which is, if you're not familiar with virtual pets, there's the Tamagotchi, which was released in 1996 for girls, and then in 1997 it was the Digimon, which is short for digital monsters for boys. And it was the manga was initially penned by Hiroshi Izawa, and it was Come On Digimon, the Capering Monster Bun in 1997. Now, unfortunately, that one was never published until they actually came up with a newer series, which was Digimon Adventure V Tamer, and that one was published in 1998. So that's actually where we first get to see the character here we know in North America as Tai, so Taichi. And unlike the anime and the manga, they are very much aware of what Digimon are. In like, they're holographic, but it's still a very cool concept to actually see them explore it and venture into the digital world to eventually help save it.
Cool. Lauren, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, I would like to recommend Mason Ikoku by Rumiko Takahashi. That was my first my first manga that I picked up. Um, so the story itself centers around Yusaku Godai, who is a 20-year-old student who's living in this kind of like really dingy boarding house called Mason Ikoku. And he's planning to leave because he's fed up with the conditions and also fed up with his very strange tenants, or the very strange tenants that he lives with. And he decides to stay when he sees the new manager, Kyoko Ontanashi. And so it features just a vast array of characters, very, very centric, very, very much Rumiko Takahashi, and the love story between Kyoko and Yusaku. And I don't know, I really liked it. Even when I was younger, I really liked it. And I went to go see if I could find my copy of it, but unfortunately, I don't know where I put it.
Yeah, I remember watching the anime when I was younger and really liking it. Amanda, what is your recommendation for us?
My recommendation is Pet Shop of Horrors. It's by Matsuri Akino, and it's kind of a supernatural horror-esque thing. The It came out in 1995, and it focuses on Count D, the guy on the cover, um, who has a shady past and a Chinatown pet shop where he sells mostly cats, dogs, birds. But if you know how to ask, he also has a back shop where he stocks supernatural pets that can help you achieve things or help you get revenge. Um, but you have to be careful why you're asking, because County has his own ideas about who deserves the pets, and they might just turn back on their owners. Um, the other main character is a detective, Leon Orcott, who works in LA and attempts to prove that the Count is up to something, but he's hampered by his refusal to believe in the supernatural, even when it starts happening to him. So it's a long, mostly a collection of one-shots about people and various supernatural creatures.
Nice.
But there's also a longer arc throughout the 12-book series.
Very cool. I've never read that one. I now want to read it. Now, I figured one way that we could parse out some of the amazing works from this time period would be to talk about some of the most popular genres at the time. So we're going to talk about shoujo, which is girl type manga, and shonen, which is boy type manga. So, you know, if you're thinking back to the 80s and 90s, gender roles were much more specific. They're not today. So if you're a girl and you want to read boy manga, that's cool. If you're a boy, you want to read girl manga, that's awesome. If you're non-binary and you want to read whatever you want, go for it. But let's talk a little bit about some famous shoujo and shonen. I'm going to start off by talking about Sailor Moon by Naoko Takeuchi. I, of course, used to wake up super early in high school to watch Sailor Moon every morning. Sailor Moon says. And the manga is great. Now, the manga we do have because it's so popular that it has been re-released several times. But if just for anybody who doesn't know, it's also in the magical girl genre. So it's basically, here's this ordinary girl, and because of this, special destiny, in this case, she's like living in an alternate reality where she used to be a princess, the princess of the moon, and she meets a talking cat who tells her that. And then when she like exposes this jewelry, or in Sailor Moon S, like her makeup compact, she goes through this transformation, and then she gathers friends who also are destined to be Sailor Scouts, and they fight evil together. And it's really good. And Usagi is a great character because she's silly and likes to eat and chase after boys and stuff like that. So I would say the hallmark of shonen manga in the late 90s would be Dragon Ball Z, which I used to read through a popular magazine called Shonen Jump, which was really hard to get a hold of. Dragon Ball Z is really different from Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball, Goku's a kid. He's with Bulma. They run around. They collect Dragon Balls. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Dragon Ball Z was like a whole different thing where everyone was like super powered up, and all these fights and all these battle poses, and the planet Namek exploding in 5 minutes for like 20 episodes. Like there's just good stuff there. So for anybody who would like to read Akira Toriyama's classic Dragon Ball Z, Maria, what did you want to talk about?
So I actually ended up picking something for Shoujo theme. What I picked was Magic Knight Rares, which we unfortunately do not have in the system. It is definitely a much older series. It was written by Clamp, which is a group of female Japanese manga artists, and it was serialized in the magazine Nakayoshi from November 1993 to about 1995. So with this story, it's actually a cross of different genres. So we actually get to see the magical girls. We get to see an isekai, which is when you're pulled into another world. It could be in a book or anything, but it also actually goes through the mecha genre. So what's neat about this is that you meet three girls who are completely different. They're all in middle school, and they have no idea who they are. But when they exchange looks, there's this huge beam of light that comes and tells them that Sephiroth, the world, needs their magical knights. So you meet Shiro, Hikaru, Ryuzaki Umi, and Hoji Fu. So there's different class distinctions. Of course, one is a tomboy, one is very girly and elegant, and the third is very smart. So what they find out is the only way they can the only way they can go back home is by helping save the world of Sephiroth. So it's actually really cool. You find out that in order to become fully formed magical knights, they have to awaken these three spirits, which are actually these huge mecha robots that they have to actually engage in battle in order to be able to save this world. So it's a really great manga series. There is an anime for it as well, but definitely think that if you're in like adventure, magical girl, like superpowers, it's a really great series to get into.
That sounds like a really great intersection of different manga genres that were popular at the time. Thanks. Amanda, what would you like to talk about for shoujo or shonen that was good for you?
I actually have another Clamp title, Cardcaptor Sakura, which they wrote right after Magic Knight Rayearth in 1996. This one is actually set entirely in our world. It's about a 10-year-old named Sakura Kinomoto who releases a magical deck of cards by accident and has to go around collecting them before they wreak havoc on the regular world. It's very bubbly, very happy, but there's also a lot of emotional turmoil with things. There's various relationships that get talked about, and you find out about Sakura's mother who died earlier. Uh, it's very focused on the emotions, and that's usually a hallmark of the shoujo genre.
Wow. Yeah. And that sounds like that would be appropriate for even younger readers, right? If you're reading about a 10-year-old protagonist. So
Definitely,
it's nice.
it's in our children's section at the moment, and in 2016 they released a new series with Sakura in middle school that's still coming out.
Cool. The next genre we're going to talk about is Mecca and Cyberpunk. So Mecca has to do with basically giant robots. Um, a lot of space opera type stuff is caught up in there. And then Cyberpunk is like androids and cyborgs and a lot of dystopian themes. So the one I want to talk about, which was one of my favorites when I was growing up, was Neon Genesis Evangelion by Yoshiyuki Sadamoto. It involves this boy named Shinji. His father works for this underground company called Nerve, and these big mechanical angels come from space and try to destroy the world. So what they did was they built these Evangelion robots that can be powered only by a child, of course, who gets like plugged in a special suit, and like their life waves, biorhythms sync with the robot, and then they can fight. Of course, famously, Shinji is hard to motivate, has a lot of angst where his dad is concerned. um, he's not sure of his relationship with the different female pilots that he is sharing with. And then, of course, at the end, it's one of the craziest endings in anime history for sure. People are still trying to figure it out. So that would be my favorite mecha. But my true love is Battle Angel Alita by Yukito Kishiro, which was made into a live action / CGI movie recently that was actually pretty good. And it had an anime in the 90s. They only did the first two books, I think. The first book or the first two books is they turned into like a limited animated set. But basically, the world is completely messed up. There's a sky city called Tefaris, and then there's the scrapyard that is on the ruined earth below. And people who live in Tefaris live in like this utopia, and no one's allowed to go there. They just send goods and products like up through these tubes. Um, and this one guy who's an ex-Tefarian is a cyborg doctor, and he's coming through the scrapyard, and he finds a chassis, like a torso, with the brain still intact. So he rebuilds her. She doesn't really have her memories. Then she finds out that his side hustle is a hunter warrior. So he goes after bad guys with like his rocket powered hammer. And she decides she wants to become a hunter warrior. He's not down with it, but her memories start coming up that she like knows this ancient um, cyborg martial art called Panzerkunst. And I will say that that is my favorite manga. I read it from beginning to the very end. I read that series for 20 years, and it was good every time I touched it. So I can't recommend it highly enough. Um, Maria, what did you want to recommend in the Mecca and Cyberpunk genre?
So for the mecha, I chose the mecha aspect because the first mecha series I ever came across was the Gundam series, the Gundam universe, and it's massive. So there's like a huge Gundam multiverse, and many of the timelines don't intersect. But there's Mobile Suit Gundam. The one I am more familiar of because of the anime, which I then went on to read the manga, was Mobile Suit Gundam Wing, which was from 1995 to 1996. And this is basically where we have these large humanoid robots that are typically bipedal on 2 feet, but they're controlled by new types, which are humans who are now able to live in space. Um, so with this, Gundam Wing actually found better success here in the US than in Japan. So what happened was that the year is after Colony 195, And the United Earth Sphere Alliance is a large military power that's actually trying to control all of the colonies on Earth. But 5 colonies are trying to resist. So what they do is they send 5 of their warriors basically to use the power of these Gundams. And the thing is, Gundams aren't supposed to be on Earth. They're just supposed to be in space. So what was really cool was getting to see all of these guys basically transform these ships into these giant robots trying to defend what is left of the colonies. Like, I mean, before the Gundam suits would each be piloted, they would have to either take form. I guess many would be more familiar with the Transformers. So there'd be ships that would transform into these Gundam mobile suits. So it was a really great series. There was a romantic aspect to the Gundam Wing series, but the manga was so much fun to read. And it's still going today. I mean, we have 2019, they celebrated the 40th anniversary. So there's new series coming out, the same with the manga. So I think it's a great read for anyone trying to get into the mecha genre. It's definitely a great way to be introduced to it.
Yeah, long live Gundam. Let's see. Amanda, I think you were going to recommend one of my favorites here.
Yep, and I actually managed to find the
Yes.
big new deluxe edition of Ghost in the Shell. You may know it from various different places because it's had anime, movie, several manga. There's actually also a new manga based on the anime standalone complex. So you can find an entry point in various places. The manga is about a future Japan, well, a future world, where most people have at least cyberized their brains so that they're able to connect to the internet through ports in the back of their neck. Some people have up to 90% cyborg parts instead of human bodies. But in this world, there's still crime. And the main character is Major Motoko Kusanagi, who is mostly cyberized. And they tackle various cases that have to do with androids or robots and various political implications. It's very action focused, but the manga is playful as well. You can see things like highly detailed mechanical drawings versus simplified comedic faces. But you will see the familiar cast of characters that you might if you had started with the anime like I did. And it's an interesting case with manga and anime, but I think we'll get into that later.
Yeah. And I do love Masamune Shiro's work so much. Like, I remember being completely obsessed with the anime of Dominion Tank Police when I was in middle school. That's a conversation for another day. But speaking of lightheartedness, let's move on to comedy, because comedy is a really big part of manga popularity at that time. And I'm going to bring up 2. One that was started, I think, in the late 80s, which is Ranma 1/2 by Rumiko Takahashi. And the other one is from a little bit later, which is FLCL by Hajime Ueda. So Ranma 1/2 is Rumiko Takahashi's ever super popular long-running series about Ranma, a boy who's training in martial arts with his dad. They go to these cursed spring in China to train, and they fall into the spring, and magically now they turn into whatever last died in the spring when they're splashed with cold water. So Ranma actually turns into a girl version of himself, and his dad turns into a panda. And then there's all these people, like, there's the person he's engaged to, arranged marriage to, whatever. And then there's all these other girls that are chasing after Ranma that he's encountered on his adventures, and they almost everybody, and then the people who like them all go to the cursed spring. They all fall in the spring. They all turn into different stuff. So it's just like shenanigans basically, and with romantic overtones, very playful. Had a great OAVs too, like just standalone movies for Rama. But yeah, Rama was, because it's so popular, was re-released several times and is in our teen section. FLCL is a little bit later. Sometimes people call it Furry Curry or Fuli Kuli. Um, they it's really unique manga because it breaks the fourth wall. It is kind of weird and almost alternative manga, like what they call AX manga, and it's very wild. But it's about a boy who meets this woman from space. She smacks him in the head with a guitar, and now an international portal is opened up in his forehead, where she reaches in and grabs all kinds of stuff, robots and just different powers. And she rides a scooter, and he is like sort of puppy love chasing after her all the time, even though she's completely using him. Fun story. The anime for Fulikuli came about because there was a little bit of leftover budget at the end of the Evangelion project. And with that money, they made Fulikuli, and they signed a um, agreement with the band The Pillows to do all the music for us. So I don't know if you're like me, but I still listen to the FLCL soundtracks all the time. They're super great. Um, let's see, Maria, what did you want to recommend for comedy?
I wanted to recommend Karekano, or His and Her Circumstances, the English title. It is written and illustrated by Sura Masami, and it's a romantic comedy blend. It was serialized in Lala from 1996 to 2005 and is collected in 21 volumes. Unfortunately, we do not have it in the system, but it's definitely a very funny manga series. It's the need to be perfect pops up with like many of us. And the heroine here is Miyazawa Yukino. She's got perfect grades. She's like the best in sports. She's really pretty. She's always clean and neat. But at home, she's a complete slob. So she's really just spoiled. And she's the oldest of her three sisters. But she's like a self proclaimed egomaniac. And she loves being praised and lives for it, essentially. But then she finds out she's not the number one student anymore. There is a male counterpart, and it's just really hilarious to see how she tries to beat Arima, and all of the girls love him, and he's not only smart, but like the teachers have completely like picked him out to be the teacher's pet. So it just adds more salt to the wound for Miyazawa. And like what happens is that while Miyazawa is just like hell bent on taking him down, Arima actually ends up confessing that he has a crush on her, and like goes over her head, and she's just like gets home and she's just like, ha, the most popular and smartest guy has fallen for me. And then it just like dawns on her that she hasn't realized that she actually has a crush on him. Now it's a really hilarious romantic comedy. I mean, like any comedy, there's always going to be something mixed in there, and there is some darkness to this comedy, but it's definitely a great manga to read, and it's really fun, especially with the art. The expressions for Miyazawa are hilarious.
Nice. Lauren, you wanted to recommend another Rumiko Takahashi work that's super famous and was a huge craze when it came out, right?
Yes, so it's Urusa Yatsura. And
Lum.
yes, alum. It is a shonen manga from 1978. I think this was her first series.
I think so.
Because I know she's done so much, and but so aliens have arrived on planet Earth and have every intention of pretty much invading and demolishing the planet unless humans selected by their computer can beat them in a game of tag, kind of. And the human player has to touch the horns of the alien competitor. And unfortunately for Earth, the computer selected a very unlucky, very pervy, very silly high school student named Ataru Moroboshi. And his competition is the daughter of the alien invaders leader, Princess Lum. So Adro does end up winning, but only because he steals Lum's bikini top. And also, he is kind of spurned on to win when his girlfriend tells him that she will marry him if he is able to save planet Earth. And there is a little bit of a mix up, and he declares that he's ready to get married to his girlfriend, but Lum thinks it's for her. And so she accepts, which is not what he wants at all. And yeah, it what kind of ensues to me feels like a Betty, Veronica, and Archie esque love triangle. It's very silly. It's very comical, very funny. I'm rereading a lot of the older manga that I had read when I was younger. So I have not gotten very, very far in this one. So I can't speak to all the different plot points, but that's just the very basic premise of how it starts. So hopefully someone will be interested in it. It's very good. And I do have one more to recommend, and that one is Azumanga Daioh, and it is by Kiyohiko Azum. It is from 1999, so it is at that last kind of like 90s cap, and it is a shonen manga. And um, Azum is actually the creator of Yotsuba and who I will probably be talking about a little bit later or in a different series. And it is, so this is more of a slice of life comedy that kind of features a ragtag bunch of high school girls and their two teachers. There's child prodigy Chio, who's both envied and adored for how cute she is, but she does not like that at all. And she's super smart as well and very wealthy. There's Tomo, who is very childish and energetic and impulsive and the troublemaker of the group. There's Yomi, who is the more reasonable and responsible one. And my favorite character, Sakaki, who is kind of like the gentle giant of the group, and she loves all these things that are very cute, especially cats. But cats don't really love her back, and she frequently gets bitten throughout the series. And so this isn't, it's not like it's not your typical manga. It's kind of almost like a in comic form, so just a short panels, and then it goes into the next series and the next series and the next series. But it's very cute, worth a check out.
Awesome. Amanda, what funny stuff have you got to recommend for us?
So, I have a series that I actually started reading in the late 90s. And back then it was in flipped format. It's called Oh My Goddess. And it's written by Kosuke Fujishima. It stars college student Keiichi Morisato, who accidentally calls a goddess helpline. And instead of having a regular wish in mind, which any normal person would have when finding out that they get one, he instead accidentally requests that the goddess he's talking to stay with him forever. So that summons the goddess Beldandy to Earth, and many wacky goddess hijinks ensue, especially when her sisters, her older sister Erd and her younger sister Skuld, come to live with both of them. There's all sorts of they have encounters with demons who are basically just the other side of the corporate workforce in heaven. And the younger sister has all sorts of gadgets that she creates There's spells, but mostly they treat magic as a sort of technology, like a programming for the universe. I think that's kind of interesting. Um, it is a very long running series. Um, it started in 1988, and the final book in the US came out in 2014. It spans 48 volumes. Uh, and so I think it's really fun, and you should give it a chance.
I think we actually have some re-releases of Oh My Goddess in our teen section.
We
So
might.
anybody
They
who's
released
interested in checking it
collected
out.
editions recently.
Nice. Thank you for that recommendation. So there are so many other genres: fantasy, serials, slice of life, horror, space opera, that we just have an etc. Category that where we can all just recommend something that we really liked. I am going to recommend something that's in the fantasy horror. It is a seinen manga, which means it's designed for young men, like basically 18 and over. It's called Berserk by Kentaro Miura, and it is a absolute classic horror manga. But it's fantasy based. It's there's this swordsman who's just like on his own. His name is Guts. He could care less about anything but what he's about. He swings a gigantic sword. He's like the original, my sword is so big, how can I possibly swing it? And it's about how he joins up with this crew called the Band of Hawks, who's led by this charismatic, super beautiful leader. And unbeknownst to Guts, like they basically, most of the series is just them like battling other groups and going to war and following Griffith's lead and believing and trying to make him a noble. But everything goes wrong when Griffith is thrown in jail and he starts to waste away. They manage to kidnap him out. And it turns out that he has a secret. He has this thing called the Egg of the King and around his neck, and he awakens it, and it brings all of the demons up on Earth. They slaughter the Band of the Hawks. Guts loses pretty much everything. And then the rest of it is his journey of solitude, where he's basically trying to get his revenge. It is a very long running series. It is extremely beautiful. It is really well drawn, but I will say that the horror is real. So just be prepared for that. Maria, which one did you want to recommend here in the etc.?
So I wanted, excuse me, I wanted to recommend Fushigi Yugi, The Mysterious Play. So this is a shoujo and isekai manga. So it's also bringing people to another world. And this one was written and illustrated by Yu Watase. It was published in 18 volumes, but what's awesome is that we have the first 3 volumes in our library system, and we also have volumes 10 through 12. So they're a little scattered, but you can request them. The series actually contains Chinese and Japanese elements. So the series has 2 middle school friends. So you meet Miyaka Yuki and Yui Hongo. So they're trying to pass their, trying to finish middle school. And in Japan, what you need to do is you need to be able to take entrance exams to the high school of your choice. And this is what they're trying to do. And in the library, they actually discover a book, and it's the universe of the 4 gods. And what they do is that the book tells you that should a hero arrive, that this book will begin the adventure and they will receive a wish at the end of the book once the whole story is done. So they think it's all a ridiculous game and they need to focus on studying, but they get sucked into this world, and Miyaka is known as the dunce in the group of friends. And Yui is the very smart one. So when they're pulled into this world, Miyaka is actually shown to shine a little more. And like we see the adventures begin with Tamahome, who is someone who will become very important later on in the series. So what Miyaka finds out is that she is the priestess of Suzaku from legend, and there's 4 gods within this story or world, and each kingdom reveres these one particular god. So when the kingdom falls into disorder, the priestess should bring peace, and she'll possess the power of Suzaku. Um, what drives her is her wish to actually get into the school of her dreams. She has problems with her mom. She has a single mom, an older brother in college. So she has to fight constantly to bring her grades up. So this is like a real opportunity for her. But things get a little tricky, and it's definitely a great series to read. And we have the first three, so definitely check them out in our system. It's definitely a what if kind of series.
Cool. Thank you. Um, Lauren, what out of the etc. did you want to recommend?
Sure. So I have two. One is Yokohama Shopping Log, and the other is Escaflowne of the Heavens, or the Vision of Escaflowne. So I'll start with Yokohama Shopping Log, which is by Hitoshi Ashinano. It was designed in 19, or it was created in 1994. It is sci-fi and Simon. So it's set in a oh gosh, I can't talk today. Set in a post-apocalyptic world. Yokohama Shopping Log centers on Alpha, an android who runs a small coffee shop in place of her owner, who left on a trip for an indefinite amount of time. The manga is considered slice of life as well as sci-fi, and the reader kind of follows Alpha throughout her daily life activities and interactions with her friends. There's a petrol station and owner, a farmer, Ojisan, and his grandson, Takahiro. And I found it to just be very simple and kind of sentimental and very sweet manga, even though there's, the world has been kind of overrun by climate change, so to speak. And it's perfect for those who are interested in kind of character building and relationships between characters, and anybody who likes climate or post apocalyptic fiction stories. And then Escaflowne of the Heavens is by Akikatsu, and that one was also from 1994. It is a shonen manga, and I have a few notes about it, but I can talk a little bit about that part later. So the series itself focuses on 16-year-old amateur fortune teller and student Hitomi, and she's been having these kind of vivid dreams of a floating earth, a crumbling temple, and these two men, and one whose face she can't see. And within that temple is a flower-like jewel. She attempts to kind of tell her friends fortune one day, and in the process of doing so, manages to open a portal to a universe, or to the universe that is from her dreams. And this happens after she utters the words that she heard in a dream previously, that was uttered by one of the elderly men in her vision. And so the land that she finds herself in is called Fanale, and she is no longer Hitome. The two men call her the Energist, and she is a part of the flower jewel. And the man whose face that she couldn't see is actually the prince, who needs her help in the war between his land and the Zaibak Empire. So I just started this one. It's something that had been recommended to me as an anime series,
Mm-hmm.
but I decided to read it first, and I've really been enjoying it. I did start the anime too, and I'm noticing vast differences between the two. And I went and did a little bit of research. And so, what I did find out about this particular manga was that it was the concept of it was specifically for an anime, but then they chose to create a manga series as well. And from that manga series, there was a shoujo manga that was developed as well, and it was only about 2 volumes, but I believe that they used the shoujo manga as a design for the show, and then the serial itself was, drafted in a different way, or kind of stemmed from what the original idea and design was. So I guess that's why there was some difference between the two of them. But I've really, really been enjoying it.
Awesome. Thank you. Amanda, what etc. do you want to talk about?
So I have two that I want to talk about as well. The first one is called Rooney Kenshin, which is a sort of mixture of shonen, adventure, romance, historic, all sorts of stuff.
Samurai.
Mainly historic.
Yeah.
It's by Nobuhiro Watsuki, and it's a story about Himura Kenshin, a wandering samurai who was a deadly assassin during the Bakumatsu War that ended the Edo period in 1867. So he got sick of all the killing, of how much death he'd been responsible for, and he had forged a reverse blade sword that only has a sharpened edge on the side towards the wielder. And he became a wanderer, and 11 years later stumbles into a dojo where the master, a young woman, is being threatened by some thugs, and manages to take them down without taking a single life. The woman named Kemiya Kaoru offers him a place to stay, and he begins helping her out, and eventually gains various friends and a sort of found family that he creates. And they have to stop a couple of local thugs. And later on, there's a large arc where the government actually asks him for help regarding a criminal who survived the war as well, but has the opposite reaction and wants to destroy everything. It is very fun, and some excellent action scenes. And there's actually a direct sequel manga coming out right now that takes place 5 years after the end of the original series.
Cool. Did you have another recommendation that you wanted to share?
Yes, this was one of my first series. It's called Fake. And that one's by Sanami Mato. It's about a cop named Rio McLean, and he joins the CSI unit of NYPD's 27th Precinct, and is partnered with a man called D. Leitner. And they, well, they're police. They go on various criminal investigations. So if you are disturbed by any sort of violence or upsetting subject matter, it's probably better to stay away. But there's plenty of excellent action and actually romance. This is the first comic that I read that had a character who textually said they were bisexual, and another character who's questioning. And there's a lot of interesting relationship drama that's played out, as well as the police procedural that we get.
Cool. That is awesome. We've been talking a lot about anime, of course, because it goes hand in hand with manga. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about maybe some manga to anime favorites / fails, or some of the ones that people may not know were anime first and then came out with the limited series of manga. So I'm going to start off talking about my all-time favorite, which is Akira by Katsuhiro Ottoman, who's also a master mangaka. And this came out in 1989. It was one of the first animes to use computer animation. They had a multi-million-dollar committee set aside to produce this whole project. He used to publish Akira in Shonen Jump Weekly. And I saw the anime when I was 12, which I was way too young to see that anime. But I just loved it. I've probably seen the movie about 70 something times. I've actually seen it in the theater. And when I went to a comic shop in New York City, because I grew up on Long Island. So when I went to like a bigger comic shop in Manhattan, I was like, whoa, they have Akira manga. So, I plunked my dollars down and got it. And I was so shocked at how much richer it was. There's so many more characters. They go so much more deeply into like the religious and political aspects of it, the whole revolution type of thing, because it is sort of a post-apocalyptic world. It's like a modern crumbling world with a corrupt political system and a corrupt military complex that was doing experiments on kids trying to find like the ultimate life form. And what happened was previously they they had a match and he literally like exploded and destroyed all of Tokyo. So Neo Tokyo has been built and they have people who are poking into the mystery of Akira, and it mostly follows around a bunch of um, cyberpunk bike punks, Kaneda and his friend who's not as confident, Tetsuo. And it's about Tetsuo's rise and fall. It's about Kaneda being a hero. But I think you can find it in the adult section. They have re-released like mega volumes. There's like 5 or 6 of them, but I can't recommend it enough. It is, the intrigue is so great. Some of the ones that I think are really funny because I liked the manga for them, but they were animes first. They were successful animes first, and then the manga came out. Would be Record of the Lotus Wars, which is a fantasy, like classic, elves and dwarves, fantasy. um, Cowboy Bebop, which a lot of people probably know because it constantly gets resurgences. You could probably call that a space opera, but it's a little bit more like cowboy samurai gunslinger in space type of situation with a bunch of like um, odds and ends put together to make this motley crew, and it's about like the heartbreak that they go through. And the last one, which I got into because of Toonami way back in the day, was Tenshi Muyo. Tenchi is another kind of space opera that very similar, like Oh My Goddess, where it's like, here's this kid and he's just living a normal life, and suddenly like all these aliens come down and they're all falling in love with him and they all want to marry him and protect him, and he's having to like try to come to grips with his own power. So there's so much more I could talk about, but I'm gonna pass it off to Maria.
Yes, I'm sorry. So what I wanted to bring back was Rebecca pointed out Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon is actually one I saw as an anime first before going to the manga. Now with I'm really sorry. With Sailor Moon, we have Sailor Moon, Sailor Moon R, Sailor Moon S, Sailor Moon Super S, and Sailor Moon Sailor Stars. Now, when those came out, there were about 200 episodes, and there were only about 18 volumes of Sailor Moon, and then in 2003 it became 12 volumes. So Sailor Moon actually has a lot of extra episodes and storylines that were not originally in the manga. Not only were names changed to English, but the biggest difference in the airing between Japan and the US is that it was very censored. So we Sailor Moon in manga and the Japanese version of the anime, we had a lot of characters who were LGBTQ plus. So we had Tenno Haruka and Kaio Mishiru, who's Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune, and they were lesbian lovers in the Japanese version, but in the US, they actually play cousins, which makes it a little weirder when they're being a little more lovey-dovey, I guess. But even some of the Earth Guardians who were guardians for Prince Endymion for the Earth, they were actually lovers of the Sailor Scouts in the manga versus being gay lovers in the Japanese version, and in the American version, Zoisite became a woman instead of being a gay male. So that was like one of the bigger differences. And also with Sailor Stars, it actually never aired here in the US because what we had is the Sailor Stars disguise themselves as male pop stars, but are female in the manga. in the Japanese anime, they are males who become women when they transform into Sailor Starlight. And there's just many of the episodes just weren't dubbed. A lot of, even like in the original like Sailor Moon that was aired here in the US, a lot of the Japanese kanji within the episodes, whether it's on stores or flags, they were completely removed. They even like entered an educational segment, like as Rebecca said, Sailor Says. So they would take like educational moments within the episode and put them at the end. And I think one of the biggest things is that Sailor Moon Crystal, which came out in 2014, which was much more close to the manga. And Rebecca's expression is everything, because many of us grew up with this series, so it's very close to us. But like, it's really great. It really rings true to the manga and what it brings, like the relationships, just everything about it was great. So I thought this was like a really great series. And even though it ended with season 3, there are movies hopefully coming out soon. So it's definitely a great series to watch.
Cool. Yeah, great recommendation. And again, you can read Sailor Moon manga compiled and re-released with very pretty glittery covers in the teen section. Lauren, is there anything that you wanted to mention in terms of resources?
Yes. So I didn't feel as equipped to talk about like manga to anime favorites or fails. I do watch a lot of anime, but I know it's a lot more recent anime as opposed to some of the older ones. But I am a huge television and film score fan. And so if you are like me, you will be happy to know that Freegal contains quite a few scores from some of your anime favorites. So the brilliant Yoko Kanno, who composed music for Cowboy Bebop, also worked on the original score for Escaflowne, and both can be found on Freegal. Takahiro Obata's score for The Promised Neverland, and Yuki Hayashi's score for the most recent My Hero Academia film can also be found on Freegal. So
nice.
That's something to look forward to.
For all you J-pop lovers out there. And Amanda, what are do you have any manga to anime favorites / fails?
So I mentioned Ghost in the Shell earlier, and that's an interesting case because as we saw, it started as a manga in the very end of the 1980s. Since then, it's been turned into a movie in 1995. And an anime in 2002, but since then they've also had various spin-off movies, spin-off manga, turning an additional manga into an anime. It's difficult. It might look difficult at first glance to get into it with so many multimedia things, but what the director said when creating the anime was that it was basically a parallel world with the same characters and ideas, but not necessarily the same events. You don't have to read the very original manga to understand the anime. And the original author did help write the plots to some of the episodes, so it is pretty true to what we already know. I'd say that if you're more into the action and serious cyberpunk stuff, then you would probably go for the anime first. If you just want a fun time with some cool action sequences, then go to the manga, which also has sidebars about current technology and possible technology, like biofilms and artificial intelligences, which makes it an educational read as well as a fun one.
Absolutely.
Another thing that people might know is Fruits Basket, which was very popular in the 90s and 2000s as a manga. And it got an anime in 2001, but the anime only covered about the first half of the series. There is a pretty climactic event near the end that does happen in the manga, but they finish it up in about 2 episodes, in a way that doesn't even introduce some of the characters who are very important later in the series. Uh, the In 2019, a second anime was started that is following very close to the events of the manga, and so far has had 2 seasons, is due to have another, and is going to go through the entire series. So that's something that you might want to check out.
Very cool. Yeah, everybody loves some fruit basket. I know that we could be talking about manga, classic manga especially, all day long. I hope that this has been informative for our viewers, because a lot of the popular manga that you're reading now has roots, in the previous works of these artists, or in being inspired by these pretty epic like moments that happened in Japanese illustrated literature in the 80s and 90s. I just want to say thank you to all three of you people so much for joining me today and sharing your expertise. And please be on the lookout for further readers' advisories in the future. Signing off from PGCMLS.